This video is sponsored by the Scorched Basin Kickstarter. This is the latest installment in a series of videos I've been making where I break down some core mechanics of Daggerheart, and I try to figure out why they work the way they do. What sort of design goal is the mechanic trying to accomplish? How are these mechanics intended to represent the world of the game? Do they succeed in that goal? And today we're talking about armor and health. A while back I made a video all about understanding hit points and armor class in Dungeons & Dragons, and figuring out how to narratively describe them in our games. And the reason I made that video is because D&D's armor and hit point system is very straightforward, but it's also pretty abstract. It doesn't necessarily do the best job of actually representing the fiction of getting shot at or stabbed or whatever. It's straightforward in that it's easy to understand and implement in the game, but it's abstract in the way that it doesn't quite conform to how we expect the world to actually behave and work. So, how does Daggerheart tackle that same problem? That's what we're talking about today. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe. I've got some other awesome videos coming out this month. You're not going to want to miss them. We've been talking about the mechanics of Daggerheart a lot lately, but I've got some other D&D videos coming out very, very soon. And we're going to be making weekly Demystified videos, where in addition to covering new episodes of the Vox Machina campaign every other week, we're also going to be reviewing other one-shots. So every week you're getting a new Demystified video. So if you want to keep up with all that, make sure you subscribe. Now let's talk about damage in Daggerheart. So, first things first. In Daggerheart, when an enemy attacks your character, the GM rolls a d20 to try to hit you, just like in D&D, and they compare their roll to your evasion. Your evasion is a target number that they have to meet or beat in order to do damage to you. So this is functionally the same thing as armor class from D&D. In general, your evasion is determined by your class, because the game has worked different evasion scores into the balance of the game. Typically, if you have a really high starting evasion, your starting hit points tend to be low. That way you mostly don't have to worry about a broken character who is extremely difficult to hit, and also has a whole crap ton of hit points. The balance is baked into the classes themselves. But of course, there might be ways for you to raise your evasion to make yourself harder to hit. Certain armor options might raise, or I believe more likely lower your evasion score, because heavier armor makes it harder for you to dodge attacks, but the trade-off is that they offer better protection, and we'll get to that. Different cards and abilities and powers might raise your evasion. Your evasion is something that will almost certainly change as you go on adventures and get different equipment and level up. And I think the choice to change armor class to evasion is really smart. Part of the reason I made my other video about trying to understand armor class in D&D is because I basically discovered that there was this counter-argument that claimed that sometimes losing hit points in D&D actually made more sense to be interpreted as dodging an attack and just losing stamina. And that's an argument I just really didn't agree with for a lot of reasons. I took a whole video to explain them. But part of the reason people make that argument has to do with how many hit points D&D characters have, and the feeling that it wouldn't be rational for you to get hit by a sword and just keep trucking like it was no big deal. And that's something else that the Daggerheart system has found a great way to address, and we'll get there in a minute. But I like that evasion as a term basically helps to cut through that argument and firmly plant its flag in the realm of, if the GM rolled high enough to hit you, the weapon hits you. If they didn't, you dodged out of the way. The book even spells it out as well. In the section about evasion, it describes that when the GM misses you, you should take that opportunity to describe the way an attack fails to hit you, and have some fun with it. You can choose to say that it ricocheted off your armor, or that you dodged out of the way, or that you caught the arrow and threw it away. And with that specific example, the book even clarifies that you can't go too far. You can't say that you threw the arrow back at the other enemy and hit them with it, because that's not how it works. You would need an actual power that let you do that. But the reason they have to explain that is because they want to make it very clear that you can describe how the attack didn't hit you, but that means that evasion is how we determine if an attack failed to hit you. If an attack meets your evasion, and you take damage, you can't really describe it as rolling out of the way and losing stamina, the way some might do with some D&D attacks. If the attack roll is higher than your evasion score, there's no way around it. The attack hits you. So just like in D&D, when your enemy makes a successful attack on you, they roll their damage. So now it's time to look at your hit points. And we can already see a pretty major departure from D&D, because once again, your starting hit points are determined by the class you chose as part of the intended balance of the system, and to help represent the fantasy of the game. Wizards have fewer hit points than Guardians. A Sorcerer will have fewer hit points than a Seraph. However, the range of starting hit points is very narrow. The classes with the fewest starting hit points, Bards and Wizards, start with 5 hit points, but the classes with the most hit points, the Guardian and the Seraph, start with 7. So we've clearly got a very different system of hit points going on here. Your range of hit points that you're working with is a lot narrower than you will ever get in D&D, or even, I would say, in something like Shadowdark. Now when you level up, you can choose to gain a hit point, but it's not a guarantee that you'll gain a hit point every time. You have to choose to do so. Whenever you level up, you can choose from a list of options available to you based on leveling up within each tier of play, but you can only pick 2 every time you level up. You don't get everything. But additionally, your character sheet only has another 6 hit point slots available for you to select. So the core assumption of the game is that the most hit points any character will have, if you play a Guardian or a Seraph who starts with the most hit points and you choose to mark a hit point every time that option is available to you on leveling up, you could wind up with a maximum of 13 hit points in this game. That is less than the average level 1 Barbarian in D&D. So how exactly is the game going to make that work? Well, before we discuss how any individual blow doesn't instantly kill you in this game, this does feel like a response to D&D, right? In D&D, you continue to gain so much health as you level up, it's frankly ridiculous. It is absolutely assumed that by the time you get to level 10, you're probably going to have a minimum of 5 times as many hit points as you started with. In Daggerheart, the most hit points you can get is a little bit more than double your starting hit points, and that's if you play a wizard or a bard and you choose to mark all 6 additional hit points. You could start with 5 and wind up with 11, so you're going slightly more than double if you started with the least. So already this reduces the gulf for how much we have to rationalize how your higher level characters can now easily survive things that absolutely would have instant murdered them back when they were level 1. Daggerheart has another way to help solve this problem that we'll talk about in a second, but we're no longer talking about a game where a level 20 wizard has literally 15 times as many hit points as they did at level 1. Because that's not the way Daggerheart works. However, this problem is also solved through the mechanics of damage thresholds. Your damage thresholds are determined by your armor and your level, which means they're always going to get better as you level up. As an example, if you're wearing chainmail that has a damage threshold of 7 and 15, and you're level 1, your damage thresholds are 8 and 16. That's 7 and 15 plus your level 1, so 8 and 16. So what does that mean? Well, each threshold determines how many hit points you actually mark when you take damage, because there are 3 categories of damage: minor, major, and severe. And these categories are separated by your thresholds, your major damage threshold and your severe damage threshold. Again, if we return to our example of 8 and 16, if somebody does 7 damage to you, that does not hit your major damage threshold of 8. So you just take a minor damage, which is only 1 hit point. You mark 1 hit point. If the enemy does anywhere between 8 and 15 damage, that's higher than your major damage threshold, but it doesn't hit your severe damage threshold, so you take a major damage. That's 2 hit points. And anything 16 or higher is severe damage, so you mark 3 hit points. There's an optional rule where if an attack does double your severe threshold, so in this case, double 16, so 32 damage, or more in a single attack, then that would be massive damage, and you would mark 4 hit points. So that's useful if you want the game to feel a little more lethal than it is at base design. But what is the design goal of this system? Why doesn't all the damage just directly translate into hit points the way it does in D&D? Well, we won't get the full picture until we talk about armor in a second, but even just looking at this, I think it's really interesting that this effectively makes every arrow, every individual hit, a lot more deadly. In Dungeons & Dragons, if you have a choice between getting shot with 5 arrows or getting hit with the dragon breath from an ancient red dragon, unless you have some sort of damage resistance going on, you're going to pick the 5 arrows because they do less damage. But in Daggerheart, if an ancient dragon breathes fire on you and the GM somehow rolls 99 damage against you, you're going to lose 3 hit points. Maybe 4 if you're using the optional rule for massive damage. That's still a huge hit. Remember, the max health you can have in this game at all is something like 13 hit points, so no matter what level you are, 4 damage is still a pretty significant blow. But now let's imagine you get shot with 5 arrows. None of them get higher than your major damage threshold. They all do minor damage, somewhere between 1 and 7, let's say. So for each arrow, you only lose 1 hit point. That would still be 5 points of damage. And this means that getting outnumbered in Daggerheart is just way worse than fighting a big scary lizard. Now, I'm really underselling the impact Daggerheart monsters have as they get more powerful, and that's really unfair. I'm currently catching up with the Age of Umbra miniseries, so I've seen that some of these monsters in Daggerheart can really let loose and unload a bunch of different attacks and do a bunch of other cool stuff, so don't assume that this is me telling you that Dragon Breath doesn't matter in Daggerheart or whatever. That's not my point. Instead, I'm telling you the opposite. In this game system, every arrow hit actually does matter. And that makes sense, right? Getting hit with an arrow would be awful. In Lord of the Rings, Boromir is killed by 3 arrows. In Daggerheart, if he's a level 1 guardian with 7 hit points, it would just take some decent damage rolls to break into his major or severe thresholds once or twice, and he's a goner. And this reduces the cognitive dissonance of something like D&D, where once you get high enough level, getting hit with an arrow literally doesn't matter. Hell, when I played a 17th level wizard in D&D, I got hit with a pirate ship. Someone drove a flying pirate ship into me specifically. It landed on me. And I still had enough hit points to get up and survive it and dust myself off right afterwards and take my turn. So obviously getting shot with like 10 arrows wouldn't have been a huge issue for me. Something like that literally could not kill me unless they were all critical hits. And I enjoyed that experience. I like the idea that D&D has this power fantasy where you can survive all these things that you couldn't survive at lower levels. But it doesn't really make sense. But if I played that same character in Daggerheart, or I guess when I play that same character in Daggerheart, because I sure would like to do that at some point. But no matter what level I was, I would never be as cavalier with every individual arrow shot at me, because I just don't have the hit points to justify it, because every hit you take has the capacity to really matter. So, okay, if the game is so lethal, how do you survive it? And how is this game not a brutal dungeon crawler like Shadowdark if you only have a handful of hit points? If this game was created to represent Critical Role's style of gameplay, and they tend to play a lot of epic fantasy games, how is that possible if your characters can be felled by 4 lucky goblins? Well, this is where your armor comes in. We've already touched on the way armor provides you with your damage thresholds for determining how much damage you actually take from an incoming attack. But the other major mechanic of armor is your armor slots. If we return to our chainmail armor example, chainmail armor has what's called a base score of 4. That means it has 4 armor slots. Whenever you take damage, you can mark 1 armor slot, and only 1, to reduce the damage to 1 lower threshold. So let's say your thresholds are 8 and 15. You take 13 damage, that's past your first threshold, so you would take major damage, that's 2 hit points. Well, you can instead mark a single armor slot and reduce the damage down to minor damage and only take 1 hit point. But you are limited to only marking 1 armor slot each time you take damage. So if you take 18 damage, you can't spend 2 slots to take it from severe damage all the way back to minor damage. You can only take it to major damage. So in Daggerheart, your armor doesn't primarily determine how hard you are to hit like it does in D&D, although armor can impact your evasion score, but the primary function it serves is that armor in Daggerheart absorbs damage. And the reason it works this way is because this is a huge problem a bunch of people have had with D&D's armor system for literally decades. I know a lot of people publicly, GMs, game designers, YouTubers, have gotten frustrated with the fact that armor in D&D makes you harder to hit when that doesn't make sense. Very famously, in the real world, armor makes you easier to hit, but the compromise is that it blocks damage. It's why D&D's system of armor and hit points are an abstraction, and one that never sat right for a lot of people. And certainly I'm not one of those people who got frustrated by D&D armor. It's something that has never bothered me. But I did make a whole video explaining how you narrate damage in a way to try to make D&D's approach to armor make sense. So clearly I agree that it doesn't do a perfect job of capturing the reality of the world of the game. But for the folks at Daggerheart, they must have felt, at least on some level, even a small one, like this was a flaw of D&D that they could address in Daggerheart. Obviously, it doesn't bother Matt Mercer enough to stop playing D&D, but it doesn't have to for him or someone else on the team to still say, hey, now that we have a chance to create our own game, could we please make armor make sense? And the thing I really like about Daggerheart's approach to armor is that the armor can't just soak infinite damage. You only have so many armor slots you can spend before the armor will not help you reduce damage anymore. It's too badly damaged itself. Which means it's another element of resource management you have to figure out how to handle at the table. When the dragon hits you with that big attack and you only have 1 armor slot left, are you going to just take the full hit, or spend your final armor slot to reduce the damage but leave yourself open for whatever else the monster has in store? If you spend that armor slot now, do you think you can either kill the monster or get some distance from it fast enough before it might attack you again? These are the sorts of choices I agonize over in the middle of gameplay, which I think is what makes it good design. Now, part of any game system is also figuring out how you restore these resources, particularly during a rest. So during a short rest, which is about an hour, you can choose to do 2 of the following actions. You can either restore some hit points, clear some stress, repair some armor slots, or gain some hope. With all 3 of the restoration options, armor, stress, and hit points, you roll 1d4 and add your current tier. So there's actually a decent chance you're going to get back a lot of your resources, or maybe only get a little, but as we've seen, these are not high numbers, so any bit you get back actually helps a lot. You get the hope if you and another player character agree to sit together and describe how you're preparing for what's coming next. I feel like this is basically a mechanical incentive to either make a plan or do a role-playing scene like the ones Critical Role are so famous for. But if that's what you both choose to do with your rest, then you each gain 2 hope. But the problem is, it's possible none of your fellow players are able to spare their downtime moves to prepare because they have to work on patching themselves up. So there's a consequence to choice. You can't just dust yourself off and barrel into the next battle. You have to choose whether to heal, to repair your armor, to pull yourself together and get rid of some stress, or to prepare. Now, we haven't talked much about stress today, since you generally lose and gain stress through methods that have nothing to do with your armor or your hit points. But that's exactly the point. Taking a short rest doesn't just give you a chance to heal or repair your armor, it also helps with another resource, which has very little to do with physical damage. But you can't do all of these things. Now, a long rest is meant to be taking a few hours at camp, and so of course your options are a little more effective, but you can still only choose 2. You can heal all of your wounds, clear all of your stress, repair all of your armor, or prepare for the next day and gain 2 more hope again, or work on a larger downtime project. But you can still only choose 2. I think this is kind of trying to capture the same tension D&D tries to establish with your slowly regenerating hit dice. See, on a long rest in D&D, you get back all your hit points and all your spell slots, but you only get back half of your total hit dice you spent during the day. So if you used more than half your hit dice during your short rests, then you're going to be down a few hit dice for this new adventuring day. But this has always been a bit of a strange system for new players to get their heads around, because nothing else in the game works this way. The design goal is clear. They felt there should be some sort of consequence for a really tough adventuring day where you had to take lots of short rests, so you only restore half your total hit dice, encouraging you to spend them more judiciously. But while we could also debate whether this accomplishes the design goal or just acts as yet another incentive for players to take a long rest after every single encounter, something they already feel compelled to do after every fight in D&D anyway. But even setting that aside, the half your hit dice system is just kind of weird. Nothing else in the game really restores half every day. But in Daggerheart, it's much clearer why you only restore certain resources on every long rest, because you're the one who chooses which resources you recover. It's part of the game design that you can't do everything you might want to on either a short or a long rest, so it makes those decisions matter, and that adds some tension to your rests. Now, all of this has helped to explain the way Daggerheart's armor and damage systems work. But here's a question. Is it good? Well, I definitely think this is going to depend on your own personal opinion. I can't tell you whether or not the system is good. I can just tell you as much as I can so you can decide whether or not it's right for you. I think the system makes a lot of sense. An attack targets your evasion, your armor can help soak that damage, and in this system, every individual arrow can still pose a big problem for you. You also don't get as many hit points at higher levels that a higher level character would be unrecognizable to their lower level counterpart. In D&D, a 20th level wizard with no spell slots is still able to take so much damage they're basically Superman compared to a level 1 wizard at full power. On the other hand, like I said, I'm currently catching up on Critical Role's Age of Umber miniseries, and there's an episode where Laura rolls a critical hit on a monster. And in Daggerheart, a critical hit means your damage dice are maxed, and then you roll your damage dice on top of the total. Does your attack do 2d6 damage? On a crit, that's 12 damage plus another 2d6, plus whatever modifiers you have. It's the same approach to crits some of us use in D&D, because it's just a little better than the double your dice method of D&D, but in Daggerheart, it's just the way criticals work, and I like that change a lot. Now, for the spell that she cast, Laura rolled a d20 for her damage, so that would be 20 base damage for a crit, plus another d20. But she can also choose to use one of her powers to double one of her damage dice. So if she rolled an automatic 20 on one die, she chooses to double that. That makes it 40 damage, plus her modifier of 3, so 43. And because they're using the optional rule where you take extra damage if you double your severe threshold, and that definitely applied to the monster in question, the monster took 4 hit points of damage, took a severe wound. But then she still actually needed to roll her other d20 for her damage die, and she rolls a 13. That's 56 hit points. So that's still just 4 hit points. 4 hit points is the maximum any creature can take on any turn in Daggerheart, and even then, only if you're using the optional rule about taking 4 hit points if the damage is double your severe threshold. And that kind of sucks. I'm not necessarily always one of those players who feels like they have to find new combos that can add more and more damage to every attack, but when the opportunity comes along to really boost up my damage, then hell yeah, I'm going to take it. I'll drop my Paladin Smite into a critical hit to roll a bunch more dice, because I want to do as much damage as possible. But in Daggerheart, are you incentivized to do that? Does it make sense to even try? Or is that just going to be a waste of one of your resources? Laura had a power that allowed her to double a damage die. Should she instead have spent that power on another attack where she rolled like a 6 for her damage in the hopes of bumping it up to something that would get through one of her enemy's damage thresholds? Is that more fun than just dropping a shitload of damage on the enemy? The answer is, I don't know. It depends on your group and what you get out of the game. I do like the idea that instead of trying to do as much damage as possible to end the fight quickly, you're looking for ways to boost individual damages so each strike is more effective up to a point. It seems like that would be an interesting challenge, and it also seems to imply that the fight can't be over too soon, which I think would make for a more rewarding encounter. But will that be fun for a long-term campaign? Now, playing Daggerheart doesn't mean you need to rethink your approach to combat. Remember, this is no longer a game where the entire party is guaranteed to take a turn before the bad guy gets his next move in initiative. I've run D&D games where the players realized they had exactly 1 round to kill this monster before it came back to his turn, and he used his action to kill a party member, which is definitely what would have happened on their turn. So everyone focuses their fire and tries to boost their damage and does whatever they can to try to attempt to smoke that monster as fast as possible. But in Daggerheart, monsters act whenever you fail a roll or roll with fear. So that sort of situation just doesn't happen anymore. The tension of a Daggerheart encounter is completely different. And that's a good thing. I don't just want every RPG to try to recreate D&D. I want some of them to shake things up, to try to cultivate different experiences at the table. But is Daggerheart's damage system as much fun as D&D's? Well, if I put myself in the shoes of a player receiving damage, it's very different, and I like it, so I don't know if I think it's better, but I'm definitely keen to take it for a spin. I think I will enjoy that system. But when you're a player dealing damage to an enemy, I'm not sure how much I'm going to like that system. And ultimately, I really won't know until I actually get a chance to play some more Daggerheart. Something I'm already excited to do for lots of reasons. But in this case, I actually need to play the game for a while just to see how I feel about its very different approach to damage. But whether you're playing D&D or Daggerheart, you should absolutely check out the Scorched Basin Kickstarter. Scorched Basin is a system-agnostic TTRPG setting inspired by Dune and Mad Max, an expansive desert wasteland that can be played in D&D, Daggerheart, Shadowdark, Morkborg, Call of Cthulhu, Orbital Blues, Cypher, or any of your other favorite TTRPGs. You can drop this desert into your homebrew world as the site of a meteor crash that left a vast, blasted wasteland in its wake. But you can also run your entire campaign in this setting. It has everything you need. Timelines and lore and factions and custom player options and a unique magic system called The Current. And if you think a desert wouldn't provide enough variety, the Scorched Basin also has a multitude of different biomes within it, like dead forests, towering maze-like rock formations, the rolling sand dunes we associate with Mad Max, and solid salt flats. And at any point you might encounter graveyards of ruins, forgotten technology, and shipwrecks buried in the sand. And the Kickstarter even includes lore-accurate recipes provided by a world-class chef, so you can prepare a meal themed to the setting and truly immerse your players in the Scorched Basin experience. This project was created by Homie and the Dude, the same team behind the Wandering Tavern. And this time, they brought in the help of a whole bunch of other members of the community, including me. I did some voiceover for the final product, so I actually helped collaborate in my own very small way. And as part of their commitment to support the community, this project uses absolutely no AI, it's 100% human-made. So if you like this channel and you think the Scorched Basin sounds cool, then check it out at the link in the description. Using my link will let them know that I sent you, and that helps the channel a whole lot. So once again, check out the Scorched Basin Kickstarter by visiting the link in the description. And thank you so much to the team behind the Scorched Basin for sponsoring this video. Now, as we're wrapping up here, there is one more criticism I've heard of Daggerheart's armor system. I think it's more true about the playtest version than the final version, but it's still part of the reaction I've heard people have to the game. Their feeling is that Daggerheart's armor system is a little more complicated than they might expect, and I will admit it took me a little bit of time to figure out how it worked as well. It's a mechanic I was having a hard time absorbing from just watching a Daggerheart actual play. I had to both read the book and watch more than one game. I had to watch a few episodes of Age of Umbra before I felt solid that I really understood the system. Now, I think that's just because of how I absorb information. I'm an experiential learner. I have a hard time learning by just hearing how something works. I kind of need to see it in action. But there's another criticism people have had. See, Daggerheart bills itself as a narrative-first game. And some people say, well, this is such a crunchy game system, how can it be narrative first? It doesn't line up with how people interpret that term. And we do not have time to get into that today because that's a whole other topic. I am going to make a whole other video about what does that mean later this month. I have a lot of thoughts about it. I think I know what the designers behind Daggerheart mean when they say it's narrative first, and why a lot of members of the audience are also struggling to understand how that term applies to this game, since it's not very similar to other narrative first games in this hobby. So keep your eyes open for that video later this month. I was originally aiming to release it at the end of this week, but, you know, I might still get it out this week, probably not, but what you will definitely get later this week is a bonus Demystified video. I'm going to talk about a one-shot game that I think we can learn some lessons from. Hooray! Yeah. Hooray! But I think you're really going to enjoy that video when it comes out later this week. And in the meantime, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you can keep up with everything I've got going on this month. And if you want to help make these videos possible, consider supporting me on Patreon. Everyone who signs up really helps a whole lot. These supporters have helped keep me afloat during a pretty wild year where I haven't always been able to manage the video output I would like, and so I am so grateful to anyone who has the capacity to join the Patreon for any amount of time, and everyone who's been a patron for any amount of time this year at all. If you're not currently able to offer any financial support right now, or you have to bow out of the Patreon for a while, that is obviously completely fine. Please do whatever you can to take care of yourself. You have to make sure you prioritize that more so than supporting me, because even just having you here watching these videos helps a lot, especially if you watch them the day they come out. That really is a huge help. But also, if you get to them whenever you get to them, that's totally fine too. I don't really care. But if you happen to watch videos the day they release, it helps a lot. And if you want to see more discussion about Daggerheart's mechanics, I've got a playlist right here of all the Daggerheart videos I've made so far. And I've got some more coming soon, so go check these out if you haven't already, and keep an eye out for more. Until next time, play fair, and have fun.